Sometimes pretending can reveal the truth about our hearts. In life, we often wear masks to fit in, to protect ourselves, or to survive certain situations. But occasionally, pretending can take an unexpected turn. It can show us who we really are and what we truly feel. In the story of the waitress and the billionaire CEO, this truth unfolds in the most unpredictable way. When she agreed to pretend to be his wife for a week, neither of them imagined how much that one act would change the course of their lives. What started as a convenient arrangement soon became a mirror reflecting their real emotions, fears, and desires. The billionaire CEO had built his entire life around control. Every deal, every meeting, every choice was planned and calculated. He never let emotions interfere with logic, and he certainly never allowed anyone too close to see the man behind the suit. To the world, he was powerful, confident, and unshakable. But behind that image was a man who had forgotten how to feel. Years of pressure and responsibility had hardened him, and love was something he considered a distraction. When circumstances forced him into a situation where he needed someone to pose as his wife, perhaps for business, reputation, or family reasons, it was supposed to be a temporary fix, a transaction with no strings attached. Then came the waitress, the complete opposite of his world. She was warm, spontaneous, and unpolished, the kind of person who lived by instinct rather than rules. Her life was far from perfect, filled with financial struggles and long hours at work, but she carried a sense of honesty that no amount of money could buy. When she offered to pretend to be his wife, she did it not out of ambition or greed, but out of compassion and courage. Her simplicity disarmed him in ways he didn't understand. She wasn't impressed by his status, and she wasn't intimidated by his presence. She treated him like a person, not a headline, and that sincerity began to shake the walls he had built around himself. As the week unfolded, the act of pretending slowly blurred into something real. The waitress had to play the role of a loving partner, but in doing so, she found herself genuinely caring for him, noticing the quiet sadness in his eyes, the way he struggled to smile, the exhaustion hidden beneath his composed demeanor. He in turn began to notice her resilience, her humor, and the warmth she brought into every room. The lines between acting and feeling grew thinner each day. They laughed together, argued over trivial things, and shared stories late into the night. Things real couples do, but for them, it was supposed to be just an act. Pretending forced them to step into each other's worlds. The billionaire learned to slow down, to appreciate the small things. A shared meal, a genuine laugh, a quiet moment without pretense. For the waitress, the experience showed her that even those who seem to have everything can be lonely, lost, and longing for something genuine. Their act became a journey of discovery, not just of each other, but of themselves. Sometimes it takes stepping into a role to uncover what's hidden beneath the surface. When people pretend, they often think they're hiding. But in truth, pretending can strip away the layers of defense we built. In trying to be someone else, we sometimes reveal the most authentic parts of who we are. For the billionaire, pretending to have a wife forced him to open up emotionally, to play the part of a caring husband, and in doing so, he rediscovered empathy and tenderness he thought he'd lost long ago. For the waitress, pretending to belong in a world of luxury made her realize that she didn't need to change herself to be worthy of respect or love. Their conversations became more personal. What started as scripted moments to maintain appearances became genuine exchanges of thoughts, fears, and memories. The billionaire shared stories from his childhood that he had buried for years, and she listened not as an employee, but as someone who understood. The act of pretending created a space safe enough for truth to emerge. Ironically, the fake relationship became the most honest connection either of them had ever experienced. In our own lives, we sometimes find ourselves pretending too. Pretending to be strong when we're hurt. Pretending to be indifferent when we care. Pretending to be happy when we're lost. But in those moments, our true selves often surface through the cracks. The act becomes a test, revealing the depth of our emotions and the authenticity we try to hide. Pretending is not always about deceit. Sometimes it's a doorway to realization. The waitress's offer wasn't just about helping the billionaire. It was about trusting herself to step into something unknown. She didn't know how to play the role perfectly, but she knew how to be real. And that authenticity made the act believable, not just to others, but to him. Her laughter wasn't rehearsed, her kindness wasn't scripted, and her mistakes made her human. Through her, he saw what genuine emotion looked like. And through him, she saw that vulnerability could exist even behind a hardened heart. Each day of that week peeled back another layer of pretense until what remained was something raw and undeniable. They began to care not because they were supposed to, but because they couldn't help it. The bond that formed was no longer part of the deal. It was the truth that had emerged from the lie. In pretending to be husband and wife, they experienced what real partnership meant: understanding, patience, and mutual respect. Sometimes pretending is the safest way to explore feelings we're afraid to admit. It gives us permission to feel without fear of consequences. For the billionaire and the waitress, it was a temporary arrangement, a performance meant to end. Yet through that act, they found what they had both been missing: connection. The very thing they thought they were faking turned out to be the most real part of their lives. The story reminds us that pretense can sometimes be a mirror reflecting our hidden truths. What we show to the world may not always be who we are, but in moments of play acting, we often find courage to express emotions we've long suppressed. The billionaire discovered that love isn't weakness, and the waitress learned that love doesn't require perfection. In pretending to be something they weren't, they found everything they needed to become who they truly were. Real connection begins when we drop our walls, not our roles. In a world where everyone tries to appear strong, successful, and untouchable, genuine connection has become rare. People spend so much time hiding their vulnerabilities that they forget how to be seen for who they really are. But sometimes life brings two people together in a way that forces those walls to crumble. In the story of the waitress and the billionaire CEO, that truth unfolds slowly, like a quiet sunrise after a long night. They met as strangers, both hiding behind their own masks. He, the powerful man who showed no weakness, and she, the cheerful waitress who smiled through her struggles. Yet, when their paths crossed, something unexpected happened. Beneath the act of pretending, they found something real. Something that neither status nor wealth could build. An emotional connection born from honesty. The billionaire CEO had spent years constructing walls around his heart. Every decision he made was guided by logic and strategy. He trusted numbers, not people. To him, vulnerability was a liability, and emotions were distractions. He wore confidence like armor, using success as a shield against loneliness. But the truth was, he had forgotten what genuine warmth felt like. When he met the waitress, he didn't plan on letting her in. She was supposed to be part of a temporary arrangement, a convenience. Yet her simplicity, her natural laughter, and her ability to speak her mind without fear began to chip away at the barriers he had built so carefully. The waitress, on the other hand, had her own walls, invisible ones made of self-doubt and survival. Years of hardship had taught her to be cautious. She had learned to hide pain behind humor and kindness. Life had never given her the luxury to dream beyond the present. So when the billionaire asked her to pretend to be his wife, she agreed, thinking it was just another challenge she could handle. But she didn't realize that the act would open a part of her she had kept locked away. The part that longed to be understood, respected, and loved without conditions. As they began their week-long arrangement, they played their roles well. They smiled for others, held hands for appearances, and spoke as if they had been together for years. But in the quiet moments, when no one was watching, the act began to fade. It was in those moments that they saw each other. Not as a billionaire and a waitress, but as two human beings longing for connection. He saw the tiredness in her eyes after long hours, the way she hid her insecurities behind jokes. She saw the heaviness in his silence, the loneliness behind his success. And slowly their walls began to fall, one conversation at a time. True connection doesn't happen when we try to impress someone. It happens when we allow them to see us as we are. For the first time in years, the billionaire found himself speaking honestly. He talked about the pressures of always being in control, the emptiness of achieving everything but feeling nothing. The waitress listened, not out of obligation, but out of genuine empathy. Her presence didn't demand perfection from him. It allowed him to breathe. He realized that strength doesn't come from hiding your feelings, but from having the courage to share them. The waitress too began to open up. She told him about her fears, about how she had stopped believing that people like him could understand people like her. She spoke of her dreams, her struggles, and the small victories that kept her going. And he listened, not as a man of power, but as a man who wanted to understand. In those exchanges, the pretended relationship transformed into something deeply human. When people drop their walls, communication changes. Words become more honest, silence becomes comforting, and every small gesture carries meaning. The billionaire began to notice the things he had overlooked for years. The beauty in simple acts, the warmth in genuine laughter, the peace in vulnerability. The waitress showed him that connection isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about being there, not as who you're supposed to be, but as who you really are. Their time together blurred the line between acting and living. They were still pretending for the world, but in private the truth had taken over. They no longer spoke like strangers bound by an agreement. They spoke like two people rediscovering what it means to trust. Each day their walls lowered a little more, not because they tried to force it, but because they began to feel safe. Safety is the foundation of connection, and for the first time, both felt seen without judgment. He started doing small things for her, gestures that didn't come from obligation but from care. She cooked for him, not as part of her role, but because she wanted to see him smile. Those moments didn't belong to their act, they belonged to them. The billionaire found that the more he opened up, the more peace he felt. The waitress found that the more she trusted him, the stronger she became. Their connection grew not through grand gestures, but through honesty, patience, and acceptance. Sometimes people think love is about finding perfection in someone else. But real connection isn't about perfection. It's about understanding. It's about two people standing before each other, stripped of their masks, unafraid of being seen. For the billionaire, dropping his walls meant admitting that money and power couldn't fill the emptiness inside him. For the waitress, it meant realizing that she didn't have to pretend to be someone else to be worthy of love or respect. As the week continued, the relationship became more real than either of them expected. What was supposed to be temporary became meaningful because they stopped pretending emotionally. The CEO no longer cared about maintaining his image, and the waitress no longer hid her truth. They met as two equals, flawed, honest, and human. Connection isn't found in perfection. It's found in the courage to be authentic. When people let their walls fall, they give others permission to do the same. The billionaire and the waitress taught each other that vulnerability is not a weakness but a bridge that leads from loneliness to understanding. And that's how real relationships begin. Not when we play our roles perfectly, but when we finally stop acting and let ourselves be seen for who we truly are. In the end, this story reminds us that sometimes the most genuine bonds are formed in the most unexpected ways. When we stop pretending to be perfect and allow ourselves to be real, love finds its way in. The waitress and the billionaire's story shows that true connection isn't built on wealth, image, or status. It's built on honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to let someone see the real you.